Acides Academy back here with the exoskeleton part 2, and here we're going to concentrate on the cerebral column. Now, we already know that the exoskeleton has got 80 bones. The bones in the body are 206. Axio is 80, right? This is the one we're able to see in blue. So the bones of the exoskeleton have got the skull, sternum, ribs, and the vertebral column. So we've already looked at the skull, which has got 22 bones. So let's look at the vertebral column, which has got 33 bones. So the vertebral column is divided into the cervical vertebrae, the thoracic vertebrae, the lumbar vertebrae, the sacrum, and the coccyx. So the cervical vertebrae has 7 bones, thoracic 12 bones, lumbar 5 bones. The sacrum has got 5 bones which are fused together. Okay, you can't see the difference because they are fused. And then the coccyx has got 4 bones which are also fused together. This is what's supposed to give us 33. Cervical vertebrae is found on the neck region, thoracic on the chest region, lumbar vertebrae that is on the just down the chest region, just down the ribs. Okay, and then we've got the sacrum, which is very down there, and then you've got the coccyx, which is also called the tail. All right, so let's start with the cervical vertebrae, which is found in the neck region. Now, the cervical vertebrae said it has 7 bones. There are 7 cervical vertebrae bones. So the first cervical vertebrae bone is called the atlas. The second vertebrae bone for the cervical is called the axis. And then the other ones you just say C3, C4, C5, C6, and C7. So that's how you just name them. So C1 has got a name atlas, C2 has got a name axis. So the C is meaning cervical. So if you're talking about those which are found in the thoracic region, they will no longer be C, but T. So you're going to have T1, T2, just like that. So after the C7, you are going to go to the thoracic. So start again T1, T2, like that, and there are the 12 of them. All right. So let's look at these ones. So starting with the atlas, which is the cervical bone number 1. So this is a basic structure of the atlas, which is C1. Okay, so we can see for this one, it has got this part on top, which we call anterior tubercle. Now, a tubercle is simply a protrusion. Anything that comes out of the bone, a bone is a tubercle. So anterior means in front, so this is going to be found on the front side of the bone, right? So meaning that if you are standing like this is the part that is going to be in front, and then this part is going to be behind, right? So that is a tubercle. Since we have an anterior, also supposed to have a posterior tubercle. A tubercle is simply anything that comes, a protrusion or anything that comes to come outside of a bone like that, right? We also have facets. Now, facets are just points of attachment. So we have got facet for din. So this is a facet here. So meaning that there's something that has to attach there. Okay, it is either a point of attachment to other cervical bones or a point of attachment for some other things, right? So we also have the anterior arc of the atlas. So the arc is just this portion of the bone, this portion, this portion here, that's the arc. So we're calling it anterior because it's going to be in front. So we have to also have the what? The posterior. So this part is going to be the posterior arc because it's going to be found behind of the atlas. I mean behind of this bone, yes. And then we also have the transverse process. So this opening here, that is what we call a transverse process. There's something there, right? And then we have got the inferior articular facet. So inferior means down. So this part, we call it inferior articular surface because It's more like it's going to articulate with downward. It will be down. You think of it like that. So it will articulate with the bones which are down. This portion which you're able to see. So calling it inferior articular facet. Right, and then you have got a transverse foramen. So a foramen is simply an opening. So this is a foramen. Even this region here is also a foramen. So this is a structure of atlas or C1. Right, so this is the structure. So when we get to see it, just looking at it, we should be able to identify it, and we should be able to identify the parts which it has. So you notice that it's going to be different from other bones. So this is it also. So we have got facet for Deans, which is this one here. We also have superior articular facet, this one which is here. So superior means up. So that is the one which articulates with the upper part. Okay. Let me see what was here which I mentioned. Okay, this was an inferior articular surface. So meaning that this bone we've turned it upside down for this to be superior. Right. And then we have got the foramen transversarium, this one, which we also just call transverse foramen. And then we have got a transverse process. So just this thing here is what we are calling as a transverse process, which we also saw on this other bone. Okay, this part with this portion, that's a transverse process. So the posterior arc, which is this one. So posterior means up. So this arc like that. And then we have got the posterior tubercle. Tubercle is a protrusion there. Okay. So basically the same parts just like the ones we've seen on the previous slide. So these are the parts of the atlas. And then let's look at the axis, which is C2. Now the axis is a bit of different. So it has got also this part here. So this is what is going to fit into the first bone. That is going to this is what fits into the axis. Okay. So the posterior articular facet, you have got this portion. So this one articulates. It's a facet because it gets to join. It connects with other bones, and that obviously with the atlas. So this is the axis. Got a dens there. Okay. Also have the superior articular facet. This one, superior articular facet. You also have the antarticular part. This portion here, the antarticular part. The inferior articular process. This one here, inferior articular process. So this part can articulate with other bones down. That's why we are calling it inferior, meaning down. So I've got also a spinous process. A spinous process is anything that gets to come out of the bone like that. It's a projection also. That's a spinous process. Now I can see that it has got, it more goes like that. So we call it bifid because it's not just like this. It makes something like this. So it's a bifid spinous process. And then we have got a transverse process, which is also this one. So a process is more like something that just comes outside. Okay, something that comes outside of a bone like that. So this is a structure of the axis. So this opening here, this foramen, this is where the spinal cord is going to pass. Right, that's where spinal cord gets to pass. So this is the atlas and the axis. Atlas, which is the first one, you have got the superior articular facet. This one, superior means up. So it articulates with the upper part. Okay. Also have this side, so that's same. We also have transverse ligament. A ligament is simply a connective tissue. Okay. So we also have groove for vertebrae artery. A groove is just more like something, a little bit of space which is left. Okay, a little bit of space which is left where something can pass. So that means there is a bit of space that is left where arteries are able to pass. So you find the space in the bone where arteries can pass. You also have the anterior arc. This is the anterior arc. This is going to be the posterior arc, right? So you come on the axis, you have got the ondotoid process, this thing which is up, the ondotoid process. And then you have got the bifid sponneous process. You have the transverse foramen, which is this open space here. Then you've got a superior articular facet also here. So what's the difference between these two? You can see that this one, the sponneous process is just a little, like a small, right? And it's a bit bifid, but it's very small. And then the ondotoid process is not more there, but it's quite small also, right? That is another difference that we're able to see. Okay, so this is on the atlas and the axis. So this is how they get to articulate. So C2 is going to join with C1. So you can see these are the articular points that we are mentioning where they get to meet these two. Okay, that's where they get to articulate. So this is it for this one. We also have now C3 to C6 cervical bones number 3 to number 6. Those are more similar in shape. So that's why I classify them together because they are similar. Okay, so this is how they get to look something like this. So you can see they have got a body, which these others we didn't see, right? Like for these, we didn't see any body here for the atlas and the axis. So this should help you identify when you see this. They don't have a body, right? So here I've got a body, and then you have got a transverse processing that gets to come outside. Transverse process. Then this opening is going to be called a transverse opening. Okay. You also have the pedicles, just this space here, this region here, which is between the body and this articular surface. That's what we call a pedicle. Okay, we have got a lateral mass. Lateral mass is this same articular surface here, and then we have got lamina. Lamina is this region, this space here, from the articular surface here to the spinous process. And then we also have the vertebral foramen, which is this foramen is simply a space, this space here. Then you have got a superior articular facet. So we already mentioned if this is a facet, even this is going to be a facet. It's an articular facet because that's where it gets to articulate or gets to join with other bones. So you can also consider it the way it is here. Now we've turned it, this portion has been taken on top like that. So we have got the body, we have got a groove for nail. So this just anything that gets to go like inside of a bone. So we have got a bone, any region that gets to go something like this. Okay, you have a region that goes to go more like inside. So that is what we call a groove. So you can have nerves passing here. That's what we call a groove. And then the region between the body and the facet here, that's what we are calling as the pedicle, right? We have got the transverse foramen, this open space, the vertebrae foramen, which is this one, or the superior articular process. Superior just means up, so this is a superior articular process, which is just this same one here, superior articular process, because articulates with the up. It is found up like that. Okay, so that is it. Then I've got the lamina, which is just this region between spinous process and the superior articular process. So also here for C3 to C7, the spinous process is also bifid, like it is divided in two parts like that. So let's look at now C7, which is a bit different from C3 up to C6. So here is C7. So one notable thing that we're able to see is that, of course, it has a spine, tubercle spine. Here is a tubercle spine there. Okay, this is a spine. So a tubercle is simply anything that gets to come outside. So this is it. And then it has a superior articular process. This is an articular process here. This is also an articular process here. And then I've got a transverse process. Okay, this is a transverse process. And then this is going to be called the transverse foramen. And then this is a cervical foramen. Posterior tubercle, we also have this thing that comes outside. Anything that comes outside, of course, we know that is a tubercle, right? So this is at the end here. So what are the basic parts we're able to see? A tubercle, that thing that gets to come outside. And actually, this same thing that gets to come outside, the long part of a bone, that is called the spinous process. Okay, this same spine is called the spinous process, but we can see that in C7 it is not bifid. In these other bones we're seeing it, it was more bifid, it was something like that. But here it is not bifid. And then we've got the transverse process, just this thing that gets to come a bit outside like that. Okay. Also the vertebrae body. So this is the body here, vertebrae body. Then vertebrae foramen and then transverse foramen, that opening. So we should be able to identify these different parts when we've been given these. All right, so this is on the cervical vertebrae. Let's look at the thoracic vertebrae, which are found in the chest region. Right, so for these, we know that they are 12 in number. So for these, they're the ones which get to attach to ribs, and they always have a spinous process. So generally, cervical vertebrae bones, they lack a transverse process. They lack that process generally, right? They lack a transverse process. But when you come to these, they are going to always have a spinous process. They always have it. So if you consider just here, you can see C1 and C2. C1 doesn't even have that process really. Like it's so short down here. Okay. So that is why we are saying in general these are going to lack a transverse a transverse process. But of course they do have, some of them have, but generally they lack a transverse process. Right. Now the cervical vertebrae, when you get to touch your back, you are going to feel them. And those things that you get to feel, that is actually what we call the spinous process when you touch your back. So their general structure is something like this. They've got a body, they've got a vertebral foramen, okay. So they've got a transverse costa facet. There's this facet that gets to attach with the ribs. Even this superior costal surface also attaches with the ribs. So ribs actually attach at two different points. So it will attach here, it comes also and attaches there. So the rib becomes something like that. It attaches at two different points like that. Right. So we also have the superior. Superior just means up. Superior articular surface or facet. There we've got the spinous process also. They always have a spinous process. Okay, we also have the superior vertebral notch. Superior vertebral notch, which forms margin, a lower margin in the foramen. Now, basically, you can see that for this one, they don't have a transverse foramen. Okay, like we had those spaces which we are seeing in the cervical bones, like this space which is here. Let's do this. So we are seeing these spaces which are here. This is what we are calling as a transverse foramen. Oh, sorry, not this space. This is not a space. This is an articular facet, but this space here, calling as a transverse foramen. Basically, for these others, you cannot see that. You don't have any opening where you can see those facets. So this is their difference also. So you can also see it in this way when you get to look at it in the lateral or in the side. This is a body, superior costa facet, meaning that it is up, meaning superior, and then you have got inferior costa facet. Then you have got inferior notch. Okay, a notch is simply something that goes in like that. That's a notch. Then you have got a transverse costa facet. So the names are also important. We've got a superior costal facet, inferior, and then this one, this side, is a transverse. This is where the head of the rib is going to attach. And then you've got this region here, which is called the pedicle, between these two facets, like that. Then you've got the superior articular process and facet also here. Okay, those are also articular facets. And then you've got the transverse costal facet, which we've already mentioned, transverse process. So it's something that gets to come outside like that. Since this is a transverse costal facet, then this is going to be a transverse process. Then inferior costal process. Inferior costal process, this thing that comes outside as a process. Inferior costal process. If it's inferior because it's inside. Okay, it's inside like that. So we're going to consider then that the outside is this part. So this one is inside here, so it's going to be called inferior. Actually, inferior means down, so that one is down. Right, so this is what we're also able to see, and this is how ribs get to attach. So we have got this is a rib that attaches on this costal surface. So we've seen the head of the rib, that's the end of the rib. It attaches at 2 points. It attaches here and it also attaches here. Okay, so that is how ribs get to attach. So that is, it attaches on the superior costal facet, and it also attaches here on the articular facet on tubercle of rib. So a tubercle is simply something that comes outside. So there's something that comes outside like that on the rib. That's the one which attaches something that goes inside there on the what? On the same bone here. So there's something that goes inside like that. There's space inside, and then for the rib there's a space that goes outside like that. So they're able to fit in like that. So on the transverse process, that's where the tubercle of the rib is going to fit. And then on the superior costal facet, this is where the head of the rib is going to be able to fit. Right. So this is it. So this also shows how they get to connect. So we have got this, which is the superior costal facet, and then this is the transverse facet, which attaches with the this portion of the rib which protrudes outside, and then the head of the rib. So there are two joints which are going to be formed, and each of them are costro, uh, costrovertebral joint. So the joint between the rib and the vertebral bone is the costrovertebral joint, and the costrovertebral joint describes two groups of synovial plane joints which connect the proximal end of the ribs with their corresponding thoracic vertebrae, enclosing the thoracic cage from the posterior side. So posterior, like these ribs, they get to connect with the vertebrae at the back. That's the posterior side. So these costovertebral joints, they are a type of synovial joint. Right. So that is also very important for us to know. Now, we also have the lumbar vertebrae, which is found between the ribs and the pelvis. Between the ribs and the pelvis. So down the ribs, above the pelvis. That's the one you're able to see. And there are five lumbar vertebrae bones, and these are there to support the weight of the body. So this is the structure of a typical lumbar vertebrae bone. There's a body, there's a pedicle, which is this region, and then there's a superior articular process, this articular process here. There's a lamina, this region between the spinous process and the articular process there. And then there's also the transverse process, this thing that gets to come outside there. That's a transverse process. And then we also have the spinous process. Of course, there's also a foramen, vertebrae foramen. So also here we don't have transverse foramen. So the most notable distinction from other bones is the presence of a large vertebrae body. So you can see the vertebrae body is so large as compared to the bone itself. The spinous process is short also as compared to the bone and a bit of thick. Okay, so the vertebrae foramen is a bit of triangular. You can see there. Right. So these are lumbar vertebrae bones, and basically all of them will look the same. So let's also look at the sternum, since it is also part of the exoskeleton. So the sternum is this bone that we find in front. So it articulates with the ribs anteriorly or in front, and then the ribs behind or posteriorly they articulate with now the vertebral column. So please, we need to know that behind the ribs only articulate with the thoracic. They don't articulate with the lumbar, not with the cervical. It's only the thoracic. All right. So the sternum itself is going to be divided. You have got this part, upper part of the sternum, that is called the manubrium. And then there's this part which looks like a necktie, this part, that is called the body. And then you have got the last part, a small part which is pointed. It is called the xiphoid process. Xiphoid process. Right, so this is the sternum. And then to the sternum, that's where ribs are going to attach. Okay, so the first seven ribs, rib one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, they get to attach to the sternum itself, and so they are called true ribs. Okay, they attach to the sternum via costal cartilage. So there is a cartilage. This thing we're able to see in this is a cartilage. It's a connective tissue that connects the first seven bones to the sternum, and then the rib number 8 to rib number 12, they don't attach directly to the sternum, but they are going to attach to the seventh rib. Okay, so those are called false ribs. And then rib number 11 and 12, they do not even attach to anything. In front, they don't attach to anything. They'll just attach to the vertebrae bone behind. So these are the ones you can see they are just like that. They don't attach in front to anything. So those are the vertebrae. Uh, those are the floating ribs which don't attach to anything anteriorly. Right. So this is basically a rib that's got the head which attaches. So this one is behind. So this is going to go behind and attach to the what? It attaches to the vertebral column. That's the thoracic region. And then this articular facet is the one which attaches to the transverse uh, process. Okay, to the transverse process of the what of the thoracic, right? And then you have got the neck between the head and the articular facet. You have got the tubercle. A tubercle is something that gets to come outside. Okay, anything that gets to come outside. Actually, these same tubercles are the ones which are going to fit into the articular, transverse articular processes, like the transverse articular facets, which are found on the thoracic. It's a tubercle that fits in there. Right. Also have the costal groove. A groove is simply any more like a space in a bone where blood vessels and nerves are able to pass. And then the all of this is called the shaft. The all of this long thing is the shaft. And then you have got articulation with costal cartilage. So this end is going to articulate with the cartilage, and then the cartilage is going to connect now the rib to the sternum in front. So that is how the rib is. So this is how we're able to see it, right? So we have got costal grooves. You can see the grooves are just openings. We already said that is where arteries and veins are able to pass through. Okay, you have got a superior facet, which is going to articulate with inferior facet on superior vertebrae. So where is that superior facet? Okay. So on this diagram, we can't even see it clearly, but we have got these articular facets. We have got this facet here. We also have this articular facet here. These are the ones which are going to connect behind or posteriorly with the thoracic vertebrae. That's where they get to connect, right? So this is how they are going to be able to connect. So behind, they are going to connect with the thoracic. Okay, between 2 points, this point and this point. So if this is the head connecting with the with the facet of the thoracic vertebrae bone. And then this is a protrusion, or a part that comes outside of the rib that connects with the transverse facet of of this thoracic bone. And then in front is going to connect to the sternum, okay, via this cartilage which is here. Okay, so that is how they get to connect. So I can say that there are two connection points, this point and this point, and we've already mentioned what kind of joints are those. So also the sacrum. Sacrum is the last end of the vertebral column, this portion, right? Right, they said there are five bones which are fused to make the sacrum, and then the down portion, that's the coccyx or the human tail, right? So so on here you've seen there are different parts of the sacrum. We have got a sacrum canal. A canal is also an opening. There's an opening here, sacrum canal, and then we have got ala. So this portion here, that's called the ala, which is found on the side of the sacrum. And then I've got spineus tubercle. A tubercle is something that comes out. So these are spineus tubercles. Okay, and then we have got dorsal sacroforamina. A foramen is just an opening. Now we call them dorsal sacroforamina. All right. So of course, the word sacro is just coming from them coming from the sacrum. Now, what of dorsal? Dorsal just means posterior, or it means back. So meaning that these are found at the back, dorsal sacroforamen. So that's it. And then you have got the sacrohiatus. The hiatus, you have got this region here. That's the hiatus. So the sacrohiatus is used to access the sacral nerves. This is where the nerves are going to be able to be accessed on the sacrohiatus. So this is the sacrum. That's its structure. Okay, so we can go a bit in to look at the bonds. So we have got five bonds which we mentioned which are completely fused. So we're calling them S bonds because they are sacral bonds. S1, S2, S3 going down like that. Right. So we have got the sacral foramen, that's just an opening, a transverse line, just these lines which are able to see there. Then we have got sacral ala, which is this part here. We have got the base, of course, we have got a sacral canal there, right? So these are the different parts of the sacrum. And then the last one, that is the coccyx. So the coccyx is the one which is found at the very down there. So the coccyx is going to be connected to the sacrum through a sacrococcygeal joint. So a sacrococcygeal joint is an articulation between the apex of the sacrum and the base of the coccyx. So the sacrococcygeal joint is an amphithyroidal joint, meaning it is a joint that is slightly movable. So if you say uh, amphithrosis, that joint is a joint that is slightly movable. Okay, so this is a fibrocartilaginous joint. It's a fibrocartilaginous joint which is found here. And that is going to be it for this tutorial, understanding the exoskeleton. Thank you so much for watching. Stay